Have you ever wondered why it seems like those who are closest to God often endure the most suffering? Why is it that God's chosen people, those called to walk in His light and fulfill His purpose, face some of the greatest challenges, heartaches, and trials? It's a question that has puzzled many believers, but the Bible gives us insight into why the chosen ones often suffer. And today, we're going to explore 3 key reasons behind this mystery. If you've ever felt like you're going through more struggles than most, like the weight of the world is resting on your shoulders, you're not alone. Many of God's chosen people have faced intense suffering, from the prophets in the Old Testament to the apostles in the New Testament. But this suffering isn't without purpose. In this video, we'll dive into the reasons why God's chosen ones suffer the most, and how this suffering ultimately serves a greater purpose in God's divine plan. Let's explore these 3 reasons together. 1. Spiritual growth and refinement. The first reason why the chosen ones suffer the most is because suffering refines and strengthens us. Just like gold is purified in the fire, God uses suffering to purify and shape His chosen people into the individuals He's called them to be. Suffering isn't a sign of God's absence. It's often a sign of His presence and His work in your life. In James 1:2-4, we're told, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." Suffering builds endurance, patience, and spiritual maturity. It helps us grow deeper in our faith and become more like Christ. Think about the story of Job. He was a righteous man chosen by God, yet he faced unimaginable suffering. He lost everything: his wealth, his health, even his family. But through his suffering, Job's faith was tested and refined. In the end, God restored Job's fortunes and blessed him even more than before. Job 42:10. Job's suffering had a purpose, and it led to his spiritual growth and a deeper relationship with God. When we, as God's chosen ones, experience suffering, it's not because God has abandoned us. It's because He is preparing us for something greater. He's using the challenges we face to refine our character, strengthen our faith, and equip us for the calling He has placed on our lives. Just as a blacksmith heats and hammers metal to shape it into a useful tool, God uses suffering to mold us into vessels that can be used for His glory. 2. Opposition from the enemy. The second reason why the chosen ones suffer the most is because they face opposition from the enemy. When you're chosen by God, you become a target for spiritual attack. The enemy, Satan, wants nothing more than to derail your faith and prevent you from fulfilling your God-given purpose. This is why those who are called to walk closely with God often experience intense spiritual warfare. Ephesians 6:12 reminds us, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." When you're chosen by God, you're not just walking a physical path, you're engaged in a spiritual battle. And the enemy will do everything in his power to discourage, deceive, and defeat you. We see this throughout the Bible. Take Daniel, for example. He was a chosen servant of God, yet he faced incredible opposition. He was thrown into a den of lions because of his faithfulness to God. But even in the face of danger, Daniel trusted in God, and God delivered him. The enemy tried to destroy Daniel, but God used that very situation to demonstrate His power and protection. Satan doesn't attack those who pose no threat to him. If you're feeling the pressure of spiritual warfare, it's because the enemy recognizes the potential God has placed in you. The more you walk in your calling, the more the enemy will try to oppose you. But take heart. God has already won the victory. While the enemy may try to attack and cause suffering, he can never defeat those who belong to God. We are more than conquerors through Christ. Romans 8:37. Opposition from the enemy can be exhausting and discouraging, but it's important to remember that the battle belongs to the Lord. He will fight for you, and he will use even the enemy's attacks for his glory and your good. 3. To be a testimony to others. The third reason why God's chosen ones suffer the most is that their suffering becomes a powerful testimony to others. When we endure hardship with faith, perseverance, and hope, we show the world that God is real, that he is good, and that he is with us even in the darkest of times. 2 Corinthians 1:4 says, God comforts us in all our troubles so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. In other words, our suffering not only strengthens us, but also equips us to help others who are suffering. When others see how we trust God through our trials, it can encourage them to trust him too. Paul, one of the most prominent figures in the New Testament, faced incredible suffering throughout his ministry. He was imprisoned, beaten, shipwrecked, and persecuted for his faith. Yet through it all, Paul never lost sight of his calling. He used his suffering as a platform to preach the gospel and encourage others. In Philippians 1:12, Paul wrote, Now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. Your suffering, too, can serve a greater purpose. When others see you holding on to faith in the midst of trials, they are encouraged to do the same. Your story of perseverance can be the very thing that inspires someone else to keep going. Your testimony can lead others to Christ. God often uses the suffering of his chosen people to show the world his power, his faithfulness, and his love. Just like Jesus' suffering on the cross became the ultimate testimony of God's love and redemption, our suffering can point others to the hope and salvation found in Christ. While it's never easy to endure suffering, understanding why the chosen ones often suffer can bring a sense of peace and purpose to our trials. We suffer for spiritual growth and refinement. We suffer because of opposition from the enemy, and we suffer to be a testimony to others. But through it all, we are never alone. God is with us every step of the way, using our suffering for his glory and our good. And if you're going through a season of suffering right now, remember this. God has chosen you for a reason. Your pain is not meaningless. It has a purpose, and God will use it to strengthen you, to advance his kingdom, and to touch the lives of others. Keep trusting in him, even when it's hard, and know that he is working all things together for your good. Romans 8:28. Thank you for watching. If this message has encouraged you, please like, share, and subscribe for more content about living out your faith as one of God's chosen. And always remember, your suffering has a purpose, and God is using it to prepare you for something greater.